Alright, so we made it home safely. You ready to go over chapter 4 in The Science of Being Great in the Wallace D.Wattles trilogy? Chapter 4, the first principle in The Science of Getting Rich. Thought is the only power which can produce tangible riches from the formless substance. The stuff from which all things are made is a substance which thinks, and a thought of form in this substance produces the form. Original substance moves according to its thoughts. Every form and process you see in nature is the visible expression of a thought in original substance. Here's something I want to say really quick. Now, I mentioned in the last video how you and I are not the exception of this substance. Think of an action that you took, and say you're hungry. You couldn't choose between Baba Girl or Subway. It was either those two, because those are the ones that you're thinking about. Thought is the only power which can produce tangible riches from the formless substance. Thought is the only power that you have that can produce action that you take in producing in the physical world. So, say you want to make something, and here's actually something that I had heard about 2 years ago. Okay, so say you want to make a delicious protein cookie, and you wouldn't have made that protein cookie unless you thought of first making it. You're hungry, you want a cookie, you want a protein cookie. So you're thinking about the protein cookie, and now you literally take the actions in order to make that protein cookie visible in your hands so you can eat the protein cookie. You had to first have the thought in mind before you could produce that reality. Okay, original substance moves according to its thoughts. Every form and process you see in nature is the visible expression of a thought in original substance. As the formless stuff thinks of a form, it takes that form. As it thinks of a motion, it takes that motion. That is the way all things were created. So, when you think of a form, you literally take on that form. You embody that form. You embody that vision. And as it thinks of a motion, it takes that motion. You decide to walk down the street, or down your driveway to pick up your mail. You took the motions. You created that environment. You created that scenario of you walking down the driveway in order to get your mail. We live in a thought world, which is a part of the thought universe. The thought of a moving universe extended throughout formless substance, and the thinking stuff moving according to that thought took the form of systems of planets and maintains that form. Thinking substance takes the form of its thought and moves according to the thought, holding the idea of a circling system of suns and worlds. It takes the form of these bodies and moves them as it thinks. Thinking the form of a slow-growing oak tree, it moves accordingly and produces the tree. Those centuries may be required to do the work. In creating... Carrying on. In creating, the formless seems to move according to the lines of motion it has established. The thought of an oak tree does not cause the instant formation of a full-grown tree, but it does start in motion the forces which will produce the tree along established lines of growth. Every thought of form held in thinking substance causes the creation of the form, but always, or at least generally, along lines of growth and action already established. The thought of a house of a certain construction, if it were impressed upon formless substance, might not cause the instant formation of the house, but it would cause the turning of creative energies already working in trade and commerce into such channels as to result in the speedy building of the house. And if there were no existing channels through which the creative energy could work, then the house would be formed directly from primal substance, without waiting for the slow processes of the organic and inorganic world. I guess or could have worked too, couldn't it have? No thought of form can be impressed upon original substance without causing the creation of the form. Man is a thinking center and can originate thought. All the forms that man fashions with his hands must first exist in his thought. He cannot shape a thing until he has thought that thing. And so far man has confined his efforts wholly to the work of his hands. He has applied manual labor to the world of forms, seeking to change or modify those already existing. He has never thought of trying to cause the creation of new forms by impressing his thoughts upon formless substance. When man has a thought form, he takes material from the forms of nature and makes an image of the form which is in his mind. He has so far made little or no effort to cooperate with formless substance or formless intelligence to work, quote, with the Father, end quote. He has not dreamed that he can, quote, do what he seeth the Father doing, end quote. Man reshapes and modifies existing forms by manual labor. He has given no attention to the question whether he may not produce things from formless substance by communicating his thoughts to it. We propose to prove that he may do so, to prove that any man or woman may do so, and to show how, as our first step, we must lay down 3 fundamental propositions. First, we must assert that there is one original formless stuff, or substance, from which all things are made. All that seemingly many elements are but different presentations of one element. All the many forms found in organic and inorganic nature are but different shapes made from the same stuff, and this stuff is thinking stuff. A thought held in it produces the form of the thought. Thought and thinking substance produces shapes. Man is a thinking center, capable of original thought. If man can communicate his thoughts to original thinking substance, he can cause the creation or formation of the thing he thinks about. To summarize this, there is a thinking stuff from which all things are made, and which, in its original state, permeates, penetrates, and fills the interspaces of the universe. A thought in this substance produces a thing that is imaged by the thought. Man can form things in his thought, and by impressing his thoughts upon formless substance, can cause the thing he thinks about to be created. It may be asked if I can prove these statements, and without going into details, I answer that I can do so, both by logic and experience. I can prove it by experience. You remember in the last video I was telling you about that person that you were thinking about, and then suddenly they end up, if you know the person, they end up calling you or messaging you a few days after. Now let's go a little step further by somebody that you had, let's say went to school with for once, your acquaintances, you just met that person, but you never really knew them. And all of a sudden you thought about that person out of nowhere. You set these forces in motion, and then you end up seeing that person out on the street somewhere. It happened to me recently when I was going to get my driving test for the DMV. I was doing a little bit of studying, and it reminded me of a kid that I had in my class, and the things that he would talk about and write on the board. And sure enough, a week later I seen him at the DMV, and it's amazing how it's amazing how these things work. And, I'll leave it at that. Reasoning back from the phenomena of form and thought, I come to one original thinking substance, and reasoning forward from this thinking substance, I come to man's power to cause the formation of the thing he thinks about. Now there's also another thing I want to attach with that sentence. I come to man's power to cause the formation of the thing he thinks about. Now I remember in the last video, before we even came over here, I was talking about imagination, visualizations. You must have that mental picture in your mind first, because that is the only way that you can let the universe know what you want. What you are seeing, what you want to accomplish for yourself. You're building those mental images within the mind, and you are causing these forces to be set in motion. You are giving the universe something to work with for you to help you get and move in that direction. You were created in God's image. You are His child. You are him, embodied in a physical form. Life is a dream. Live it. Life is your creation. Create it. And by experiment, I find the reasoning true, and this is my strongest proof. If one man who reads this book gets rich by doing what it tells him to do, that is evidence in my support of my claim. But if every man who does what it tells him to do gets rich, that is positive proof until someone goes through the process and fails. The theory is true until the process fails, and this process will not fail, for every man who does exactly what this book tells him to do will get rich. I have said that men get rich by doing things in a certain way, and in order to do so, men must become able to think in a certain way. A man's way of doing things is a direct result of the way he thinks about things. To do things in a way you want to do them, you will have to acquire the ability to think the way you want to think. This is the first step towards getting rich. To think what you want to think is to think truth, regardless of appearances. Every man has the natural and inherent power to think what he wants to think, but it requires far more effort to do so than it does to think the thoughts which are suggested by appearance. To think according to appearance is easy. To think truth, regardless of appearances, is laborious, and requires the expenditure of more power than any other work man is called upon to perform. There is no labor from which most people shrink as they do from that of sustained and consecutive thought. It is the hardest work in the world. This is especially true when truth is contrary to appearance. Every appearance in the visible world tends to produce a corresponding form in the mind which observes it, and this can only be prevented by holding the thought of the truth, the thoughts of what you want to think. It is so easy to be impressed by your environment and by people around you that you could, maybe not think what you want to think for a moment and what is this word I'm looking for? Influenced by those around you. It is very hard to stand up for yourself and be your own person and be your own light, because we are the lights of the world, you and me, and it is essential that we all learn this, because not only do we need to learn it for ourselves, but for those around us as well. We are in a shift in consciousness, and we want to be a part of that shift, and we are doing what we can and learning what we need to learn in order to make that shift possible for our lives. This power can only be acquired by getting hold of the basic fact which is behind all appearances, and that fact is that there is one thinking substance from which and by which all things are made. Then we must grasp the truth that every thought held in this substance becomes a form, and that man can so press his thoughts upon it as to cause them to take form and become visible things. Now remember, not only are you setting these forces in motions, but you are also embodying that motion, that thought, that thing. The universe could only do so much for you. You have to do your part by taking the necessary action. When we realize this, we lose all doubt and fear, for we know that we can create what we want to create. We can get what we want to have, and can become what we want to be. Like everybody says that we can. It is possible for us, for me and you, to do it. As a first step towards getting rich, you must believe the three fundamental statements given previously in this chapter, and in order to emphasize them, I repeat them here. There is a thinking stuff from which all things are made, and which, in its original state, permeates, penetrates, and fills the interspaces of the universe. And repeating what that is saying right there, this thinking stuff is a conscious substance. It is consciously living. It is alive and active, and it is sensitive, very sensitive to the highest degree. It acts upon your thoughts, it acts upon your words, and it also acts upon your actions. A thought in this substance produces the thing that is imaged by the thought. Now remember, you are a thinking center, and you can produce your own thoughts. When you think of certain things and you're producing those images, not only are you, like I said, setting things in motion with the universe for it to happen, but you are also embodying that image, and you are acting out that character, those thoughts that you're producing, that image that you have in mind. Man can form things in his thoughts, and by impressing his thought upon formless substance, can cause a thing he thinks about to be created. You must lay aside all other concepts of the universe than this monistic one, and you must dwell upon this until it is fixed in your mind and has become your habitual thought. Read these creed statements over and over again. Fix every word upon your memory, and meditate upon them until you firmly believe what they say. If a doubt comes to you, cast it aside as a sin. Do not listen to arguments against this idea. Do not go to churches or lectures where a contrary concept of things is taught or preached. Do not read magazines or books which teach a different idea. If you get mixed up in your faith, all your efforts will be in vain. Do not ask why these things are true, nor speculate as to why or to how they can be true. Simply take them on trust. The science of getting rich begins with the absolute acceptance of this faith. Now again, if it is hard for you just to accept this, do the research yourself. Study a little bit on metaphysics, study more on the philosophy, study on the man that he recommended, Emerson. Emerson was one of the greatest men that had ever lived. He was a transcendentalist. He was a leader in a New Thought movement era. And Emerson himself would go over the oversoul. He called it the oversoul. Wallace D.Wattles calls it this thinking substance, thinking stuff. I like to call it the conscious energy, the conscious living spirit that has created all things from itself. It says in the Bible that God is spirit, and that is what this energy is. It's spiritual energy. It's universal intelligence. It is our Father. It is the creation, the creator of all things that has come into existence. And look into Emerson, look into Hegel. Hegel was a scientist on the evolution of man, and Emerson was a genius when it comes to new thoughts and new way of looking at things with his ideas and his genius. And with all that being said, that ends it with chapter number 4 with the first principle. And the first principle in the science of getting rich, remember the thinking stuff, thinking substance, that we are created in the image of thinking substance, and we have the ability to think ourselves, to impress this mind upon the universal mind, and also to embody that image within ourselves and create it in the material world. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and end it here, and thank you for watching. If you like it, subscribe and share this video and like it. And first and foremost, leave a comment. Leave something for me, so I could know if there's anything that I could do better. If there's any recorded angles that you guys want, if you like it recorded on the book while I read it more, so you can kind of follow along, or if you like to see, me reading it to you and explaining it more. I'm finding new ways to do this, and I'm looking for new ways to do this. Like I said, I was going over podcasts on YouTube, and we have some things that we know we're moving towards, and we know it takes time, but until then we just have to stay in the process of what we have now. So, like I said, I'll see you on the other side of the galaxy.